Hi everyone, so this is the second video for equations of a line. This is a little bit more complicated, so make sure please that you've done the first video before and the first task before you get onto this one. Today we're looking at lines which are not parallel to the x or the y-axis. So the lines won't be vertical and they won't be horizontal. In fact, they're going to be diagonal. So the first thing I want you to do is to pause the video, look at these two lines and just see. Now I've put some dots on there for you to think about. You might want to write down what those coordinates are and try and notice what is the pattern on that blue line and what is the pattern on the red line. Okay, so to help us out here, I'm just going to draw a little table. Now let's do some coordinates. So the first dot here, that is x is 2 going across and y is 2 going up. This next one here, that's x being 3 and y being 3 as well. And this one here is y, x is 4 and so is y. So what we can say here is that the value of x and the value of y are the same. When we're trying to write the equation for a line, we do it in terms of y. And all that means is you would write down what happens to x to make y. Well, in this case, nothing happens to x because y equals x. So this is the line y equals x. Okay, let's go over to our red line now. And we're going to do the same thing. We're going to draw a little table, and you can do this every time you have a question if you're stuck. Let's look at the first one here. So our first one, x is 1 and y is minus 1. Then we have here, if x is 0, y is also 0. And here, if x is minus 1, then y is 1. And finally, if x is minus 2, then y is 2. Okay, so hopefully now that you've looked at those four positions, those four coordinates, you might notice what happens. Well, it looks like whatever the x is, y is the inverse. So if x is a positive 1, y is a negative 1. If x is a negative 1, then y is a positive 1. And continues. So what we would say here, remember we always write in terms of y is the same as negative x. And that's basically saying whatever you have done to x, you do the inverse and you find y. Okay, let's look at the next bit. So now what I'm going to do is to look at these two lines. Again, you might want to write down some of the coordinates. You might recognize the one on the left already. The one on the blue is slightly more difficult. I want you to tell me, are either of these two coordinates going to appear on the line? Let's look at x for the red line for a second. Let's go for, is 16 going to appear on this line? And also, is 14 going to appear on this line? Pause the video and have a look. Okay, so if we look at this line, you might have recognized it because it's the same as on the page before where we said that this one is y equals x. Well, if we're trying to find out which coordinate will be on the line, if it's y equals x, and just for an example to remind you, this one here is 3, 3, and this one here would be 5, 5. You can tell that whatever the x coordinate is, that's the first coordinate, is the same as whatever the y coordinate is, that's the second coordinate. So 16 here, that one is perfectly possible. That one, in fact, is definitely going to appear on this line. So that's a yes. On the next one, we have 14, 18. Well, because 14 and 18 are not the same, y isn't equal to x, and therefore this is wrong. Okay, let's now have a look at our blue line. So this blue line is not a y equals x. It's also not the y equals minus x that we looked at before. So let's give you some examples of two coordinates that I want you to check. I want you to check, please, whether 5, 8 will appear on this line, and also whether 5, 2 will appear on this line. Pause the video and have a look. Okay, so what we're going to do, we're going to draw that little table that helped us out earlier. And we're going to put an x here and a y here. And we're going to just try and see what's the pattern between those two. So let's start here. And we have x is minus 4 and y is minus 1. Then we have x is minus 3. and y is 0. Here we have x is minus 2 and y is 1. Hopefully you're going to be able to see a pattern growing here. X is minus 1 and y is 2. So first thing we're going to think about, what would we do to x to make it into y? Well, how do you get from minus 4 to minus 1? And how do you get from minus 3 to 0? And how do you get from minus 2 to 1? For each, it's always the same. For each of these, you're going to take your x, you're going to add 3, and that will give you the value of y. So I'm just going to write that down here. To get our y, we're going to do x plus 3. Okay, so this line is the line y equals x plus 3. Now, we were looking at whether we could get 5, 8, and 5, 2 on our line. Well, if we have a look, whatever x is, you have to add 3. Now, if that ends up being here, look, if we take 5 and we add 3, we're going to get 8. So this one is on our line. Here, we take 5 and we add 3, we don't get 2. So this one is not going to appear on our line. Hopefully that makes sense. Maybe rewind the video if you got a bit stuck on that bit. Okay, so now we have 2 lines, a blue line and a red line. I want you to look at these 2 lines. Try and name a coordinate which does not already appear onto those 2 lines. So let's go for the blue one first. Pause the video and make a coordinate that fits onto that line, even though the lines, you can't necessarily see them. Off you go. Okay, so let's draw our table just to help us out. And this will help us to predict what coordinates would appear further on. So if we go for the first coordinate here, we've got x is 2, y is 0. Then here, we've got x is 3 and y is 1. And here, we've got x is 4 and y is 2. So hopefully, you're going to be able to see, if I want to find out y, what do I need to do to x? Well, what do I need to do to x? Well, if I take, so y equals x, take away 2. And what that means is I take my x, so let's say I've got 2 here. I take away 2, I've got 0. That's my value of y. If I take 3 and I take away 2, I get 1. If I get 4 and I take away 2, I get 2. So this line is the line y equals x minus 2. So if you have come up with a coordinate, you might want to pause the video again if that needs explaining, but if you have understood that bit, come up with a coordinate now that is somewhere on that line that's not shown. Okay, if you're not sure, then all you have to do is to think, I need to take whatever number I put in here. So let's put a hypothetical number here. Let's put 7. And I need to find my y. I just take away 2 because it's y, the second coordinate, is the first coordinate, take away 2. So that is on this line. And potentially you could have this coordinate is on this line. And you could even have 132 and 130. Those would all appear on this line eventually if you made the coordinate grid big enough. Okay, now let's look at this red line here. And for the red line, we're going to again draw a little table to help us out. Don't feel you have to draw it, but it does help, I think. Let's go for this first one here. We've got x is 1 and y is 0. Here, we've got x is 0 and y is 1. Here, it's x is minus 1 and y is 2. And finally here, we've got x is minus 2 and y is 3. Okay, so again, what we're trying to think about here is what's the relationship between x and y? If I want to work out y, what do I need to do to x? Okay. And this is a much harder one, this one, because you've got to do, remember this is going in the same direction as our negative x. So this is negative x. And don't worry if you don't understand this one, this was a really hard one. Negative x plus 1. And that means that you're taking whatever value x has, you make it the opposite. So if it's positive 1, you make it negative 1, and then you add 1, and that will give you the value of y. And if you wanted to name a coordinate on there, think about it, you could possibly have, let's see, you could have negative 5, 6. You could have negative 14, negative 14, 15. Any of those where you've changed it from a positive to a negative, or a negative to a positive, and then you've added 1. Okay, that's really hard, that one, so don't worry if you didn't get that one. Okay, so if the y coordinate is the x coordinate plus 3, what's the value of y if x is 4? Now that's a really long thing, so let's just make this really straightforward. Got a table here. If the y coordinate is the x coordinate plus 3, let's just write some x coordinates in here. Let's do 1, 2, 3, and 4. If the y coordinate is the x coordinate plus 3, well, let's just add 3 to each of these. 4, 5, 6, and 7. If the y coordinate is the x coordinate plus 3, what is the value of y if x is 4? Well, let's plot our points here. So we've got x is 1, y is 4, that goes here. We've got x is 2, and y is 5. We're actually going to run out of space here. So let's just redo this one down here. Apologies for that. But sometimes it does happen that you run out of space and you have to maybe redo what you've got. Let's do what if x is 0, minus 1, and minus 2. So we're going to add 3, remember? So this is going to be 3, 2, 1. Right. So these should be our dots going down. I'm just going to join these up. You don't have to do all of these. There we go, like that. So what is the value of y if x is 4? What's the value of y if x is 4? Well, we could do this. I mean, you can see that the coordinate grid won't quite fit, but you can actually predict what it would be here. Because all you're going to do, if the value of x is 4, the value of y is going to be 3 more. 3 more than that. So your coordinate here would be 4, 7, and that's the same as over here, 4, 7. If the y coordinate is the x coordinate plus 3, what's the equation of the line? Well, let's have a go. So we're going to do our x and our y again. The y coordinate is x coordinate plus 3. Remember, we've just done this bit. That's just here. So let's go back down and let's do what we had just done. Okay, so let's now put in the numbers here. So we're going to add 3 to each of those numbers. So minus 2 add 3 is 1. Minus 1 add 3 is 2. 0 add 3 is 3. I think you get the picture. Now, what is the equation of that line? Y equals x plus 3. And that can be gleaned, you can work that out from this bit, the x coordinate plus 3. X coordinate plus 3. Okay, so now looking at that, we're going to work out what the equation is of that line. So pause the video and have a think yourself. If you're not sure, you can just carry on listening and we'll work it out together. Okay, so let's do our x and our y just to work out what's going on here. So let's start here. X is at 0 and y is minus 2. If x is at 1, then y is minus 1. If x is at 2, y is 0. If x is at 3, and then y is 1. So what are we doing each time to get ourselves 2y from x? Hopefully you can see that if we start with this number and we want to get to this number, we need to take away 2. So for this is y equals x minus 2. That is the equation of that line, y equals x minus 2. How about this one? Have another go. I'll draw your table for you already. Take some coordinates off that and then you'll be able to work out what it is. Remember, you're doing y equals and then something that you're doing to x. Okay, pause the video and off you go. Okay, so if we put some of the coordinates onto our grid, if x is minus 3, then y is minus 1. If x is minus 2, then y is 0. If x is minus 1, then y is 1. And let's do a few more here. If x is 0, then y is 2. And if x is 1, then y is 3. Okay, so again, look, we're just thinking, if I started at x, what would I need to do in order to get to y? Let's have a look at those numbers. And hopefully you'll notice that it is x plus 2. Because for each of these, you take what's here, you add 2, you're going to get to this number. And that's the end of that. This is quite a hard lesson. So if you are feeling really stuck, maybe rewatch that video. There are 2 sections on the task. The first section is a lot simpler than the second. Feel free just to do that first section if you feel a bit stuck. And remember to come to those live login chats if you feel like you might need some extra help.